Hi everybody. Today we're going to go over the aluminum can alcohol stove. This is one of the easiest, most cost-effective, and quite honestly, most ingenious little pieces that you could add to your arsenal, whether you're a ultralight backpacker, a hardcore prepper, or even just a casual traveler. There are a lot of different variations on the alcohol stove. This is the one in particular that I find is most efficient, and we'll go over more on why that is later. For starters, let's go over your materials. To build the stove itself, all you need is an aluminum can and something to cut with. Pocket knife alone is fine, but if you have a Leatherman or something like it, the scissors are going to make the cuts a lot cleaner and a lot more easy for you. So our very first step to building our alcohol stove is we want to remove the top portion of the can. You're going to start out using your knife, and I recommend the straight blade. It's going to make the cut a lot smoother for you. You're going to start by putting the tip of your knife into the indented ring at the edge of the can's top. You don't want to put a lot of pressure here, just kind of wiggle it, because you want to avoid puncturing the can or certainly yourself. Just kind of work it till it punctures through. Taking care not to dent or damage the can's integrity, you're going to carefully use your knife blade to repeat this process all the way around. Ultimately, you want to find yourself cutting right up against the can's outer rim, rather than sticking with where you started on the indented ring. Once you're all the way around, the can's top should fall right down into the body. Use your knife blade to clean out what's left of the inner rim, leaving a nice clean opening at the top. Now that the top's off, our next step is to cut the can into two separate pieces. Good rule of thumb to follow for this is give the top piece a full extra inch over the bottom. Now obviously the measurements are going to vary from can to can depending on the size. In our case we're using a 16-ounce can, which is about 6 inches long. So we're going to cut our top piece at 3.5 inches and our bottom piece at 2.5. Usually I'll do a quick measure to find that mark on the can. Once you've got your mark, you're again going to use your knife blade to very gently make a small puncture in the side of the can, taking care not to dent it. Next you want to take your scissors and insert them into your puncture mark, and doing your best to cut a straight line, slowly and carefully cut the can into two separate pieces. Take a second to even out the edge on your bottom piece as best as possible. When we put the two pieces together, we want the bottom can to slide up to just below the edge of the top piece's tapered neck. Use this as a guide to clean up your cut for the top piece. Helpful tip here is to cut towards the inside of the can. That's going to give you the smoothest, most even edge. Whereas if you cut towards the outside, you can see that it's going to be quite ridged and covered with burrs. Once you're finished, it should look something like this. Now that we've got our stove in two pieces, the next step is to put vent ridges into the top piece of our stove that will allow the alcohol fumes to escape and combust once lit. To do this, you're going to put your pointer and middle finger together, put them inside the can, and then gently and carefully, taking care not to cut yourself, use your knife blade to make an indent running from the bottom of the can just to the edge of the can's tapered neck. Rotate the can 1 finger's length and repeat this. The dents should be only slight at the can's tapered neck and deeper down at the bottom. Taking care not to cut through the can, repeat this process all the way around, using your finger as a guide. This will ensure that your vents are evenly spaced apart once finished. Once you've made it all the way around, it should look something like this. At this point, the vented top portion of your can should slide pretty easily right into the bottom piece. If it doesn't, it could be a sign that your vents need to be a little bit deeper at the bottom, which is something we'll find out when we light it up. We've just about got our stove now. The last step before she's ready to light up is to put a very small air intake into the top. Now, you can use anything with a point to do this. Your knife point, a thumbtack, anything that can concisely and gently make a very small hole. Whatever you decide to use, put your pointer finger behind the can's neck and very gently begin to work the point through the can to the tip of your finger. You don't want to use a lot of pressure, just kind of twist it, move it through, and eventually it'll work its way through to form a very minute hole. That's your air intake. Alcohol stoves, despite their advantages, are particularly susceptible to wind. So it's a huge advantage to know how to build a windscreen for your stove. All you need to build your windscreen is just some tinfoil and a few paper clips. Start by unrolling your foil. As far as length goes, you want your screen to be long enough that it leaves about a ½ inch of space all the way around the outside of your pot. I'll typically leave a few extra inches of length. That way it allows me to adjust the windscreen size accordingly. You want to take care to keep your foil as flat as possible throughout to avoid the chance of any air pockets being built into your screen. The next step is to carefully fold over each edge of your foil and smooth it out. Ultimately, you want it to look something like this. Next, fold the screen in half and line the bottom edge of your foil up with the bottom edge of the top fold. It's important here to flatten the screen as absolutely much as possible to avoid any air pockets. An air pocket in your screen will cause it to expand from the heat of the stove's flames once lit. The last step is to fold the top over once more and each side over once more, and then smooth them out. Once your screen is finished, it should look like this. Next up, grab your paper clips, take your windscreen, and bring the two ends together. Again, you want it to size accordingly for your pot, about a ½ inch of space between the screen and the pot all the way around. The first clip goes on top to hold the two ends of the screen together. The next one goes on the bottom and does the same thing, but you're going to want to leave about a ½ inch of the clip protruding. From here, space another 3 or 4 clips evenly around the bottom of your screen, and leave that same ½ inch of the clip protruding in each case. These clips are going to act as legs or stands, and the ½ inch of space they leave between the screen and the ground is going to allow oxygen and airflow to reach the stove while blocking the wind. If you don't have access to paper clips, then poking a few small holes in your windscreen should be plenty sufficient to allow airflow. Before we light our stove up, let's talk a little bit about fuel. The least efficient fuel is 91% isopropyl rubbing alcohol. You can find it at most pharmacies for $3 to $5 for a 32-ounce bottle, and it leaves a residue of soot when burned. 95% grain alcohol is far more efficient. It can be purchased at most liquor stores for around $30 to $35 for a 1.75 liter bottle, and it leaves no residue when burned. 99% denatured alcohol is the most efficient and can be found at most hardware stores for around $10 for a quart. It leaves no residue when burned, but does burn with an invisible flame, so take extra caution. Unlike the other two, which can double for emergency first aid use, denatured alcohol can be irritable to the skin or potentially fatal if swallowed. You'll also need a source of combustion. Despite it being the least efficient of the three, we're going to use the isopropyl alcohol for our demonstration because it produces a very visible flame. Start by pouring your fuel directly into your stove. Next, carefully light it, take your hand away, and give the flames a little time to catch. If your stove has been properly vented, the flames should burn evenly all the way around the top. Here's a good example of poor venting. These flames aren't as big as the rest because not enough vapor is able to escape and combust. Here's an example of what the stove will look like with proper venting. Notice a nice even flame all the way around. With the windscreen down, you can see the flames sit straight, and it also serves to further concentrate the heat. Next we'll put our pot on, and before long, there you have it. The only way to extinguish your stove is to completely smother out its oxygen supply, so it's important that you always have something on hand that can do so. It can be as simple as a plastic container, as long as it has enough space in it to fit the whole stove and cut off its oxygen supply by reaching the ground. Once extinguished, the stove cools quite quickly and should be safe to touch within a minute, but take care to test it all the same. The leftover fuel can be reused indefinitely. To recover it, all you have to do is carefully remove the top, then you can just pour the fuel right back into the container. You can see here some of the soot that burning the 91% isopropyl produces. Typically the container I use to extinguish the stove is the same one I'll use to store it. The right size, you can pack your entire system right down into it. In addition to being light, efficient, and costing practically pennies to make, two of the biggest advantages of this particular model are the fact that you can extinguish it at any time you like, and you can recover the fuel. A lot of the other models, you just have to let it burn out. Now, I used a 16-ounce can for our demonstration since it's particularly common in size, but I actually prefer to use the larger Foster's beer cans. The aluminum is a little bit thicker, pretty sturdy, and it's also a little bit wider. So you can see you can easily support some larger pots or pans on there if you needed to. The trick to the whole thing is just experimenting, and you'll find your own system in time. The biggest disadvantage to this stove is the danger of knocking it over and spilling your fuel while lit. Depending on the kind, it can burn with an invisible flame, and it can easily cause burns to your body, your skin, your tent, or even the building that you're in. So always take great care and awareness when using one. Whether it's going to be a primary stove, or just a nice suitable backup, or even something to call on in a dire emergency, it's a great little technique to master. So get out there, be safe, and enjoy.